Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Law of Attraction 2.0, Widening the Lens on the Law of Attraction. If you're enjoying Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, then please hit the like button, subscribe, press the bell icon so that you get notified when we release cool, new metaphysical content. It's really the only way that the YouTube algorithm will notice Kris's work. So if you want to help out the channel, press the like button, hit subscribe, and let's jump into the content. And welcome everyone to another episode of Law of Attraction 2.0. And I'm super excited to be here. The last two episodes have just really been, game changers of information, talking about identity, and then really digging into last time the creator identity, the kind of who is behind the thoughts and who's creating these things, and so we had a really interesting discussion on that, and hoping maybe we can, well, not hoping, I know we're going to build on that today. So Serge, how you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good. It's been an incredible 2 days here in Toronto for late in the October. The weather has been incredibly beautiful, lots of sunshine. The colors of the changing leaves is literally stunning. It's just been a beautiful last couple of days. So I'm enjoying that. Went nice long walks with the dog before it gets too cold to do that.
Excellent. And Myrna's with us. I know Myrna's got some questions and good stuff build up.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Serge. And hi, anyone who's listening. Yes, last week we were talking about who are we really? We have a body, and who does the reality creation? Who engages the law of attraction? And Kris, towards the end, started to talk about ourselves as the thinker. I was thinking about that this week, and anybody listening who might live very much in the logical, rational realm would say, but of course I'm the thinker. I'm the one who has the thoughts. And I would like, because I know that's not what Kris is talking about, I would like Kris to expand on his reference to us being the thinker. So whenever he's ready to come through, it'd be great.
Well, yeah, and I'm wondering too, at least from some of my understandings of it, there's perhaps a lot of things going on simultaneously. I know he's used the sort of the reference of the orchestra, of being the maestro and the audience and the
orchestra as
the
well, and the
instruments, the
instruments. Yeah.
players, yeah, the whole thing. So I'm wondering if you're, in a way, we're creating as well as observing the thoughts at the same time. Is a possibility as well. So, yeah, that'll be interesting.
I certainly know, having been engaged in metaphysical readings and thought for a long time, I know at some level I am more than my body. I've always thought, yes, there's my soul, and it's been very amorphous. Couldn't really pin that down for myself until so many sessions of listening to Kris and starting to imagine. So it's not even so much rationality. It's more magical. It's a more emotional feeling of I am one of the waves of the ocean, and as Myrna, I'm one of the bubbles in that wave. So I'm much larger and much more profound. And again, the comment that Kris has made over the years is we are powers that create universes. And I'm getting that, really getting that, trusting my intuition and my imaginings far more than I ever have.
Yeah, what strikes me, this whole topic, there's quite a bit of I'm going to call it mystery there, even talking about, well, this is all simultaneous. Well, that's a pretty, at least from my perspective, that's pretty mysterious, and with the
Mm.
wave and tapping into some of those intuitions, sometimes they just seem so big, but yeah, that at some point, at some level, they're not taking up any real estate at all. So it's kind of interesting in that way. But
Yeah,
because
it's
you
a
think
good
of
way to
the
put
ocean
it.
as being massive, but really at the level of self or soul, it's like, well, but it's beyond space and time, even though it has this sort of massive character. So yeah.
Mm.
So we'll just get them online. Now we trust that you are comfortable,
Thank
and
you,
we thank you for your consideration.
and for yours.
To follow up on your discussion just now, and to follow up on the last discussion we had in this vein, yes, you are the thinker for a very specific reason. Not that you create the thoughts, because you live in an ocean of thoughts. But you do focus upon sets of thoughts or even varieties of thoughts that line up with your own sets of beliefs and expectations and so on, that entire kit and caboodle. So those thoughts that exist line up with your specific perceptions. And then you think them as the process goes. But you do more than that. You are more than just the thinker. In fact, you could even, as a small segue, consider that the concept of a Trinity, which is not unique to Christianity, it exists in many religious bodies. Some do not, some do embrace it, but the very psychological archetypal foundation is found in this principle. You think and you perceive. You are the perceiver, the observer. So you also observe the thoughts that you think in very much the same way that you dream and you see yourself, you perceive yourself in the dream, acting out whatever it is that you're acting out in the dream. The perceiver, the observer, is also creator of the scenarios that are unfolding. But there is one other particular layer, which is why we referred to it as a kind of Trinity. Above and beyond the thinker and the observer, perceiver, there is another. In Sanskrit, it is referred to as the Svarupa, the essential self, the soul. So you are those three things. And this does not deny the body, because the body itself is the, forgive the pun, but the embodiment of your specific sets of thoughts and perceptions. So it lives out your own particular set of convictions, your beliefs, all of the ideas that you entertain. all of the emotions and all of the feelings. The physical form embraces as best it can and objectifies it in one form or another, which is why it is important to take care of that particular physical form of yours. It is the only one that you have at this present moment that you can manage. But again, you are thinker, observer / perceiver, and above that, you are the essential self, the soul. So altogether, these three, this triad, functions in such a way that your particular situations are always in the transition of being your reality. So you always fluctuate between the states of energy and physicality. So as you focus, perhaps in a very manner similar to being at, say, a party, and there are little groups, two or three, one or two, three, four, five, here and there, all over the place. And you catch a few words of one group, and just by wanting to understand a little more, all of the other conversations in the room seem to recede. They seem to go into the background, and you zoom in, even if you are many feet away. And by zooming in this way, you begin to pick up and understand the words in the exchanges of the individuals. And then you may switch your focus to another group of people in another part of the room. And again, the process repeats itself. Everything else seems to disappear, to recede, and you are becoming very much aware of the words in the exchanges of this group of people. And you may do that several times. Does this make some sense to you?
Yes.
So in this way, you are in a room full of thoughts, ideas. It is inevitable. They compose the energy of what you call the observable and non-observable universe. And you focus upon a certain set of thoughts that align with what you already know, your preconceived notions of one kind or another. And by observing / perceiving, you bring them into actualization. Now, some things may take longer to manifest, some things take less time to manifest. And everyone has some small examples of how things work in this way. You may be driving along, intending to arrive at your destination to find a parking spot. And lo and behold, right there is a parking spot, perfect for you. Or it could be anything else. So we do want to also give you the impression that you are much more than just parking spot creators, because everything else in your life proceeds along the same lines. You may not necessarily pay attention to that bigger picture and become enamored with your ability to create little things. But you sometimes forget that you can just as easily become enamored with your abilities to create the big pictures, the big things in your life. And that is often very much underappreciated. Does this make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense. What I'm thinking about is how years ago, at the beginnings of law of attraction, the issue was creating parking spots or a fortune or good health or better relationship. A parking spot, for me, doesn't have much attached to it in the way of fear or expectations. It's fun.
Indeed.
However, and this, I want to get into this probably at another point about core beliefs and expectations, how they have played a part in sabotaging what I believe were my desires. And I don't want to get into that just yet, because that's a
But do you know how that works? It works on the very, very same principle. The only difference is that self-sabotaging behavior, self-disapproval, self-critical behavior, which more or less puts that stick in the wheel, is simply that you seem to be unable to move your focus away from specific sets of ideas or expectations or convictions and move away from them into what it is that you want. And that may have to do with a whole other set of issues that eventually might be unraveled. But suffice it to say that even a little parking spot might spark your enthusiasm to say, perhaps tomorrow I can create another, and then another. Well, if I can do that, what else can I do? What else can I set my sights on? Can I just as easily create something that brings more income or enables me to have a little more joy in my life? If just one parking space can do this, what else am I capable of? So it is at least somewhere to start. And frankly speaking, everything else is as easy to create as that parking spot. But you have given yourselves an extraordinary burden. You yoke things on simply because you think they are insurmountable. And you might then become more satisfied. You will settle for being able to create a little parking spot. But the big things you might feel a little bit overwhelmed with. But we can assure you that you do not have to be overwhelmed nor fearful in any circumstance. If you can open your eyes in the morning and look at the sunshine, look at the clouds, hear the birds, you have already created or manifested a very nice possibility for you. And this is very plainly put, of course. There are all sorts of extenuating circumstances in people's lives. But we do want to reassure everyone that you can do much more than you think you ever could do. Does that make sense as well?
Yes, it does. It does. There's a lot more information that's required, though, or was required by me to finally arrive at a place of saying, yes, I get that. One of those concepts was that everything is an idea.
Indeed.
And every idea has so many probabilities swimming around. This is something that I didn't get for a long time. Everything is an idea. Everything starts as an idea. And around that idea are a gazillion probabilities. So wherever I turn my attention to whatever probability, there's a good chance, if I don't get in my own way, that's going to happen. This
So you
idea,
spoke a few moments ago about core beliefs, root assumptions. So the idea often is that these particular things are enormous. They are gargantuan. They are like Godzilla of the ideas and belief systems, almost impossible because they are simply referred to as core or root assumptions, dug deep, 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 somewhere into the labyrinthine mazes of the subconscious. So that is simply another layer of fear and doubt added to the process. Whilst in truth, core beliefs, root assumptions themselves are no bigger than any other idea. They carry no more weight than any other thought. But you have weighed them down in a manner that makes it frightening to approach, as if somehow or other you are going to be approaching the angry dragon guarding its hoard of gold. And yet, it is just another set of ideas that you have subscribed to, but perhaps with more emphasis than any other. The universe, in your terms, is basically a set of ideas. One idea is not worth more than any other idea. One idea does not carry any more weight or any more energy than any other idea, except what you assign to it. So if someone assigns an enormous amount of energy to a few little ideas, that somehow or other those ideas will be unsurmountable. So we will deal with the ideas over here because they are lighter, they are more fragile, they can be moved around more easily. Then you set up a set of circumstances that make it even more difficult. But if you consider all ideas, all assumptions, all convictions on an equal footing in that particular way, then each and every one of them can be approached and understood. And it is not that one must attack ideas or remove all ideas. Instead, to understand yourself and why might an individual have put more emphasis on one idea over another.
well, if I consider a pond or a river, and I'm crossing the river and there are stones, and I land lightly on a stone as an idea, and I keep going. Had I known that years ago, I wouldn't have gotten stuck on one particular stone. And I kept thinking that stone became my stone. And I kept adding over the years until that stone became very heavy. And I couldn't dance around to other ideas. I didn't know that an idea is just an idea and I can choose anything other one. I just got stuck on this one big stone that became a boulder.
Indeed. So in other words, if we can deconstruct this, Myrna saw a little grain of sand, and Myrna began to add other energy, other weights to it. She wrote her name on it, and this is my boulder. And the infusion of energy made it grow and grow and grow until it seemed as if this is now a mountain. How do I even circumvent this? How can I climb this? It is now so enormous. You can toy with the notion that an idea is like a balloon. The more air you pump into it, the bigger it gets. But if you have a pin and you go pop, what happens to that idea? So even though this is metaphorically speaking, we are not so certain it is strictly a metaphor, because you can pop all of the convictions you have covered this idea with and reduce it again to just a notion like any other notion that you have notioned into your life.
As long as I know I have the power to do that. And as long as I know there's not an external force outside me that's deciding that that should be a boulder. I didn't know I created the boulder.
You knew there might have been some kind of a blockage of some kind, an obstacle, a challenge. It is
Yes,
said that the bird who has never flown outside of its cage will look at wild birds and think they are crazy wild beasts. They should be tamed and put in cages as well. So human beings do want to understand their own nature, but because they only see their own nature from the point of view of the bird in the cage, as themselves in that bird in the cage,
yes.
any other notion of themselves being free, wild, flying around is almost insanity. And yet, this is where it will find its sanity, in breaking open that cage door and taking that leap of faith. So we are simply saying that to express the idea that once you begin to understand the nature of the universe as ideas, constructs of ideas, then something truly miraculous begins to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If your self-made prison or cage is the result of your ideas, what do you think you can do about it? Rail against the cage, or use some of your own cognitive functions to understand that, hey, I have made this cage myself. I have caged myself here. And the key to open it is in my thoughts, in my mind, in my awareness. So let me change the nature of my thinking along those lines and take apart the cage and free myself. Now, it is easier said than done, because your species is quite, how do we say, uncomfortable with the idea of recognizing your own innate powerfulness, your
Right.
own innate
Yes.
empowerment.
Yes.
You are told in one form or another that having such ideas could be dangerous. It could take down the entire system. So you hold yourself in check and you keep yourself in check constantly, lest you stray from that very tight and narrow path that you are told you must walk. Again, all of these are but ideas.
So I come from a family that considered itself religious. I didn't. There was I was the one that was over here, not knowing at the time what was happening for me. And I look around and I look at the grip that religion has on people, and the belief that I I listen to so many very smart, intelligent, highly educated people that I have around me who believe they're not in charge of their lives. They've got to go, whether it's a church or a synagogue, and pray for forgiveness because they've made some mistakes, because the Almighty, which is not them, is going to be fierce unless they do that.
Let us put it to you this way. We do consider that religion and spirituality are very, very different than institutionalized, homogenized, pasteurized religious businesses. We separate them. The latter are very similar to the following. You go on the beach one day and you see a person. In fact, you may even have a sandcastle building contest. People will build extraordinary sculptures of sand. They might build giant lions and castles and mythical beasts of all kinds. And they may even seem fearsome. And then it begins to rain. What happens to all those sand sculptures? They literally melt away, returning to puddles of wet sand on the beach and nothing more. So in some respects, then, all of these things are just like those sand sculptures along the beach. They may seem enormous, they may seem fantastic constructs, but the clarity of mind is like rain, and it dissolves all of those particular sets of conditions and circumstances that, in the first place, do not really exist. The sand has no particular notions that it is anything but sand. The person making the sandcastle or whatever sand sculpture is like the thinker, the observer / perceiver, and the essential self. Once the essential self is recognized, brain comes and dissolves all of these ideas. They are temporary constructs. No one can expect a sand lion or a sand dragon or unicorn or castle to last forever. It is extremely temporary. It might even just take one big wave and all of it is gone. Very much like the vicissitudes of life. Does this make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that your thoughts are permanent, the ideas that your own worries, your own struggles, maybe even your own physical and mental health conditions are permanent, is another set of ideas that you have constructed, because you are still the thinker, the observer / perceiver, and the essential self simultaneously. You are all three. So to give energy to the idea of a sand lion, that this is now the reality, in some respects would be considered laughable, would it not? Everyone knows that the moment the sand that makes the lion or the dragon wet again, poof, It completely dissolves in seconds. It literally will melt away, its form completely gone. The only thing left will be the original grains of sand. And similarly, in many of your life's conditions and circumstances, the only thing left ultimately are the thoughts or the ideas that you fixated upon. And the fixation can be healed. You can instead target situations that bring you joy, fulfillment, and happiness, even if you think you might not be worthy of it. Because thinking that itself is like creating a big sand lion. And you believe this lion is now real. At any moment, it could eat me. Now, of course, you would find it very strange if a person would say, oh, this giant sand lion is going to eat me now. You would say, please reconsider. This is just a sand lion. It could be dissolved in a moment. Similarly, reconsider the kinds of thoughts, the sand castles, the lions you erect in your mind, because you did that. No one else did.
Well, an
It
example.
is not necessarily the circumstances of life that hand you, how do we say, bad cards, but it is how you play the hand.
All right. So, for example, the sandcastle, a thought. So, if I have a parent who's constantly berating, this was not true for me, and this is what came to mind as you were talking. I had a parent that kept saying to me, you know, you're stupid. You're stupid. You're stupid. Actually, I had a parent doing the opposite, and I feel good about that. But those messages, if I haven't stopped to think about this wider metaphysical realm, that message is with me 24/7 for however long I live, not knowing I've actually created that entire situation.
Indeed. In fact, we could say that that particular message, that voice, that signal, that sound, it does not play in your mind anonymously. You repeat it because you think that this is real. So you repeat it, you put it on loop, and it plays over and over again, and you begin to believe it. It begins to get anchored into your system, and you think that you cannot operate or be anything other than what that particular voice or words have told you, even though you might have many opportunities to select different kinds of voices, of words, hundreds, if not thousands of others. But instead, you have zoomed in on that, and you have built up a sand lion around it without realizing that with it being a thought that you just keep repeating, you can be somebody very different, but you have allowed yourself to be as the thought and words describe, basically narrowing your identity in such terms that it becomes difficult for you to even consider the possibilities that perhaps you are not dumbass, perhaps you're not stupid, perhaps you are bright, perhaps you are genius. You have never tested that out. You just accepted that. So this kind of discussion, all the discussions, the idea of metaphysics is not to offer some kind of hocus pocus. That is Walt Disney's purpose. Metaphysics is to offer the opportunity to glimpse the wonder of yourself outside of your comfort zone. That is its purpose. That is where the wisdom of the ages lies, in knowing that in spite of those things, in spite of those dark seeds, you choose to water and nurture and provide sunshine and warmth to seeds of beauty and creativity and love, and not pay any attention to the other things, such that without any nurturing, they cannot root, they cannot thrive, they cannot grow, they cannot consume. But instead, you watered them nonetheless, perhaps thinking, well, how bad can it be? Do you follow?
Yes, I certainly do. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Dan for his thoughts and feelings about this. I want to reserve this for another session. The idea that I gave birth and my ideas and expectations were such that I created everything around me, including that parent who had said, you know, you're nothing. You're never going to do well in life. Again, not my parent, but I'm using that as an example. Be very interesting to explore in another session with you why I would do that in this lifetime, because that's an idea I actually gave energy to, a parent saying that. So it's very interesting that to consider that I came in to a particular family for particular lessons, and I created I created these situations. Very, you know, this is just, there's so much to comprehend here, but not for tonight.
Indeed, it is a very deep well from which everyone can refresh themselves.
Yes.
Consider for a moment the desert. You might think, well, it is just a desert. There's just sand there, nothing else. But upon closer examination, that desert may still receive some degree of precipitation. And there is such a thing as a desert bloom. The desert may also have dunes, and it may have oases, and all sorts of interesting things. It might even have buried structures and ancient civilizations. So we are saying this to indicate that even in some of the most troubling circumstances, do not think of yourself and your life as nothing more than just an empty desert. The desert can still hold many surprises, and in fact, in some parts of your world, there is such a process as converting deserts into greenery. So your mind, your imagination is far more fertile than you ever imagine. You hear in terms of ancient history, how ancient civilizations settled around fertile lands, around the Nile and the Euphrates and the Tigris and many others. These are representations of particular areas of consciousness, if you like, that seem to provide a special set of circumstances with which your species, and we do not necessarily mean your species in terms of your physical form or your DNA, but your spiritual species, have strongly considered using those circumstances to create civilizations of self, which are then expressed physically. But first is self. First is self-civilization. self-constructs, constructs of consciousness, which are then transposed into physical terms. So everything truly is fertile in that respect.
And starts as an idea.
Indeed. Without an idea, you have nothing.
Yep. Yep.
Without ideas, you would not even have civilizations. Would you have a world? Perhaps not even.
Yes.
Now, of course, we're also talking psychologically and otherwise, but the main principle, the root of it all, are ideas. And when you utilize your own inner abilities to zoom in on a particular set of ideas to the exclusion of everything else, then your own creativity, your own collaborative nature, and your own capacities for love see the potential, and then you pounce upon it and you allow it to flourish like ancient civilizations flourished, and they still flourish today into what you have. So you're always creating something. Even if at first it appears that you're creating a little more than chaos, do not let those things fool you. Everything is always in a stage of transition. It is impossible for anything to be static.
And I can choose to make it not static. Yes.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you might sense or feel that, oh, this is a hopeless cause, you can correct yourself and say, wait a minute. Who said that? Certainly not I. I am not a hopeless cause. I am full of grace and love and creativity and energy. So let me do something interesting. Now, do you want to take a break here or do you want to end here?
Well, I'd like to turn. Dan, thoughts? I'm full.
Well, I
I'm
think
full for now.
I think, Kris, we're gonna do just the one episode, so maybe no break. The one thing I was thinking about with the example of the child, and when there is like an idea of that, you know, the parents are all knowing, and so the child is just sort of like subject to their beliefs. I think that's something pretty common. And the other thing is, I remember when I was a kid, I had a pretty bad elbow injury. So I was looking back and saying, like, why in the heck did I create that? And I was about in fifth grade at the time. And when I was looking at it, I remember leading up to that, I'm like, I remember thinking, I want people to feel sorry for me. Look at how hard my life is. And I want everybody to see how difficult it is. And then, boom, as this fifth grader kid, I injure my elbow and I'm walking around in a cast, and people came over and they felt bad for me. I was like, but then it really hurt, you know? So it's kind of like, well, I don't know. That wasn't like a good idea. So, but that was an example of like something really sucked, but I looking back, I'm like, I know how I created that. I was exploring those ideas and then figured out like, nope, I don't want to do that.
Indeed, it is easy to recognize that there are always certain kinds of what is the word? Consequences. And in your case, you made the connection that certain values end up biting you in the end. But at the same time, had you not at least had the clarity of mind to review that episode later on, it might have gone unseen, and you might even have created other situations simply because of a particular kind of need. But you ended up being conscious of it and nipped it in the bud, so to speak.
Yeah, yes. And I mean, it continued probably for another 30 years, 25 years. And it took that long, it took that long to figure it out. It was a really long afterthought, and of like, but I realized I continued to do that. So that's how I kind of recognized it.
After all, there are only so many body parts that you can break.
Yeah, well, after a while, it ended up being, I realized it was more conscious. I'd go out and run 100 miles and be hobbling around and be like, people, oh man, you look so terrible. And, but so it became like it meant from an unconscious thing to more of a conscious action. And then I saw it, I was like, well, boom. And, that's about the time I started when the realization started happening and the patterns changing. That's when I started studying with you. So it was around that time. But yeah, it is a persistent idea construct.
It's why I like the word expectation. Because if you think about this, what I hear you saying is you expected not to get love and care and attention unless you were hurt. That you weren't worthy of that unless you created some sort of dramatic situation. And in this case, it was physical exhaustion or pain or whatever. And we'll spend more time on this whole idea of these core expectations and how they play out in our lives. Yeah, it's a great story, great illustration, Dan, of how that expectation.
If we may add, if someone is not certain exactly what is meant by a core belief or core expectation or root assumptions, just look at different kinds of themes in your life. You may have a few overarching themes, but each such overarching themes may have secondary themes. And you may have yet a third layer of smaller themes yet, but identifying the big ones will zoom in on the secondary and the third layer or other layers, and you can find yourself really unraveling some of your own mysteries about why things happen in your life. Why does life suck or seem to? Why am I always being kicked down? Or why am I always being kicked when I am down? So just looking at particular themes in your life can help you truly get a grasp of what is meant here. So we strongly suggest that such a simple exercise in observation can open your eyes that much more. Perhaps those kinds of themes that you have cultivated from an early age might still be playing out. This time, they are playing out at the level of the adult. So not so nice. You may find repeating themes in a work environment, in home environment, in family environment, and other environments, and wonder why you are having difficulties. Those themes, overarching, secondary, third, or fourth layers of themes, they were not imposed upon you. No one said, here, take these. You just built them from all sorts of ideas. Now you can deconstruct them. They too are sand sculptures. So you can just pee on them or throw water on them and let them melt.
Well, that's funny, Kris, because one of the this is a joke here, but one of the rewards I got for finishing one of those 100-mile races was a little pin that said "I peed on the electric fence." I knew what I was. Yeah,
indeed, it is been said that sometimes some people never really learn until they do that, and then some.
Well, that was my last race, so I guess I learned the lesson.
Indeed, then we will return Joseph to you, and we thank you for your lovely consideration. And do consider again that your lives, in every which way, are merely structures that you have created out of ideas, thoughts, emotional feeling energy. So if something no longer seems to fit the you that you are becoming, then do look at what you have constructed. And with that, we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kris. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.